Four hosts, they bout to wreck shit like Marco. Addicted to the Giants like it's Netflix and Narcos. The CEO making big moves as per usual. Captain Negative calling everybody delusional. This podcast is number one. Like when you take a piss, so share the link and pass it. Like Big Jamaican spliffs and Mr. Make-A-Wish. The sophisticated click, I spit offensive lines. Now Tim can take a sip of some beer because he likes the taste of it, right? Don't forget the New York Giants beat the Patriots twice. The sickest dudes eating chips and salsa like it's Victor Cruz. Win or lose, always gonna root for Big Blue. It's true. This a classic show. Tyree, catch it, bro. Play a drinking game while you listen and call it Plaxico. Take a couple shots. If it's funny, you can rewind. To bleed blue means it's in their jeans like Levi's. Eli, man in the shit, just like a sailor. Captain, we attacking bum rush like Lawrence Taylor. Podcast on point, the sharpest arrows. BBG stay gritty like Mark Bavaro.
Good afternoon, Bleedbigblue Nation. Luckily, we had a chance to sit down with Dan Duggan of The Athletic. You can find Dan on Twitter at @DDuggan, DUGGAN 21. If you are not familiar with The Athletic, it is worth the price of admission. They really give you in-depth pieces, a lot of different stuff. You name the sport, but the pieces are a lot different than what you're going to see on your normal websites. A lot of in-depth analysis, and Dan does a great job covering the Giants for them. Dan, welcome. I hope everybody is healthy during these crazy times. Really appreciate you taking some time out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. All good here, and same to you guys.
Let's get right to it. I know you're a busy man. I know I had some questions I got to you, but we'd be foolish if we didn't bring up what happened overnight. DeAndre Baker, we have been following this since it broke. Do you have any latest information that you can provide to us? Anything that last night, something that new might have happened this morning?
No, I mean, as we record this, it's Friday at 1:30, nothing has changed from sort of like the initial wave of reporting. I haven't heard anything as far as him turning himself in. I think that's the next step, and very well may happen by the time, you publish this. But yeah, I mean, everything that was in that affidavit is really all we have to go on right now. All the parties, like the Giants, the NFL, have kind of made the obligatory, like, non-statement statement that, they're aware, but, nothing further to say. The Giants haven't actually reacted in any way in terms of cutting him, or the league hasn't put him on any exempt list, anything like that. I mean, all that stuff is, down the line. I think they have to let the at least initial stages of the legal process play out. And again, that starts with either him being arrested or him, surrendering, which is, more likely, but it hasn't happened to this point.
So, yeah, I know one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, so luckily we get a chance to touch base with some of the beat writers in the area that cover the Giants from what we do. And luckily, some of them, much like yourself, every now and again, we get a reply. You guys are great, and you're able to at least get back to us and try to keep us in the loop. And this sort of question ties into each other. So we reached out prior to the draft to some of the beat writers and asked the question, did you find it a little weird that maybe Kevin Abrams was sitting in on the free agency call with the media, the draft call with the media? And the reason why we were going down that road was you can sort of see maybe a scenario where the Giants are starting to maybe shift towards possibly keeping Abrams in-house, maybe Gettleman becomes more of an advisor, and Judge and Abrams maybe are the next pairing GM-wise. With giving up 3 picks for a guy like Baker, on top of the hot seat that Gettleman is on already, how does that reflect on a guy? I mean, you can't blame Gettleman for this taking place, but at the same token, he gave up 3 picks to move up to get this guy.
Yeah, so there's a lot in that question we're trying to tackle. As far as the Abrams stuff, I mean, yeah, that's just, strictly tea leave reading at this point. They haven't come out and said anything, but it also makes a lot of sense. I mean, when Gettleman got hired, he was 67, 68 years old. He's since had, major health scare. So I don't think anyone expects him to do this job for another 20 years. And Kevin Abrams is in his 40s, has been in the organization, for about 20 years. He came in as the cap guy. Every team needs a cap guru. But his portfolio has expanded, doing football evaluation. They've changed over the front office a few times. He's not only stayed, he's gotten, promotions, at least in terms of title. I mean, he's still the assistant GM, but bottom line is he's clearly someone who's thought highly within the organization. So it doesn't take a mind reader to suggest that if Dave Gettleman was to, step aside in a year or two, they would like to usher Kevin Abrams into that seat. Now, that being said, there's some complications with that, because if this thing goes belly up here with Gettleman in year 3, it would be a tough sell to say the guy who's been Jerry Reese's right-hand man and Dave Gettleman's right-hand man for the last 10 years is the right person, to run the ship. I think they would probably have to look outside. And again, if this thing goes so bad that they have to move on from Gettleman. I think the better scenario maybe for Gettleman, for Abrams, the organization, would be if they make some strides this year. And like you said, Gettleman could maybe, he's going to turn 7 years old, step into an advisory role, let Abrams handle it day to day. And you can say, like, oh, we're making progress. And Kevin Abrams has been a big part of that. But so I do think the team has to have some modicum of success to make that, kind of handing of the baton, go smoothly. Because, again, it'd be a tough sell. So like, oh, this guy's been right in here while the teams are going down the tubes for the last decade. I don't think the fan base would be super excited about that. And then as far as, specifically this issue with Gettleman, I mean, listen, it's tough. I mean, DeAndre Baker is a grown man, and what he does on his own time, allegedly, is on him. I mean, you cannot blame Dave Gettleman for whatever happened, at a party on Wednesday night. That being said, to your point about the draft and stuff, I mean, these teams exhaust resources, time, financial, just, that's a big part of your skill set, is being able to determine guys' character. I mean, if it was just about, like a 40 time or stats, I mean, anyone could be a GM. The challenge is you have to, look at individuals. How do they fit your team, your culture, your locker room, all these things. And there were red flags about Baker. Now, listen, he didn't have a rap sheet. It wasn't anything that was crazy alarming, but there was definitely stuff that came out in the pre-draft process that now, at the time, you kind of like were able to brush aside. But you look back now, you can't say this is a total shocker that Baker is sort of, getting in some off-field trouble. Again, no one could foresee this particular charge. But so, yeah, if you're Dave Gettleman, you have to answer for that. And I think the thing is with him, he really put himself backed himself into a corner with this emphasis on culture and patting himself on the back for fixing the culture. If you just say, listen, we're a cutthroat organization, we're not going to have a bunch of Boy Scouts, and this happens, it's like, oh, well, they never promised to be, a bunch of Eagle Scouts. When you say we're going to fix the culture and we're going to have just great, great people and all that stuff in our locker room, and you have a guy get arrested on such serious charges, it's going to come back in your face, and that's certainly what's happening now.
Yeah, they got some egg on their face with this one. Well, if this team is going to take a step forward, you would have to think that Daniel Jones is going to have to take a considerable leap. And, maybe those are some unfair expectations on a second-year guy that the Giants really need to see some movement in the win column now. And with the change of offensive coordinator, things of that nature, you guys have had a chance to speak to Jones. One of the things that have come across from what the coaches have said is, and what he said as well, is it looks like he's taken on a leadership role. Can you speak a little bit about what you have seen from Danny, or what you've heard from the coaches, maybe Garrett or Judge, about Danny and how he's taken more of a leadership role on, and what maybe to expect to see from him going into year 2?
Yeah, I mean, Garrett really hasn't spoken since he's gotten hired, so we haven't really heard much at all from him. And Jones spoke really for the first time to the beat this week. And he's very much like Eli. He doesn't really give any earth-shattering quotes and sound bites. But he basically just said, he understands he has to embrace more of a leadership role. I think the biggest comments was Judge was on with, I think it was Tiki and Tierney a couple of weeks ago, and he really raved about how Jones has taken the bull by the horns as far as being a leader. Before all the COVID stuff happened, like just being around the building and being really invested. And I guess that's continued now they're in this, virtual program, but he still has kind of stood out as a guy who's, what you'd expect to see from a quarterback. Like, I don't think with Daniel Jones, there's any question about the intangibles. I mean, anything that determines whether or not he's going to be a great NFL quarterback, a good NFL quarterback, mediocre NFL quarterback, which I think is his floor. I don't think he's going to be a Jamarcus Russell. I think we saw enough in his rookie season to know that he's an NFL competent quarterback. Again, where he goes from there is to be determined. But intangible wise, he checks all the boxes. Passive flying college, whatever cliche you want to use. He's really strong in that stuff. I think the thing that's actually more impressive, forget what he's doing this offseason, because of course it's easier this offseason because he's the starter. Eli's gone. It is his team. He was able to kind of sow the seeds as a leader last year, while being the backup, while being this highly scrutinized pick, And he didn't undermine Eli. Like, I mean, I know Eli's talked about how there was like a little awkwardness. Obviously, there had to have been, but he navigated that really well. Like, there was never any backbiting, and Eli graciously kind of handed over the reins. It, didn't feel like there was any resentment there. I think Jones just really, did a good job of not overstepping his bounds, but not being a shrinking violet. And then when he got in there in week 3, you saw the way the guys responded to him. He just had that sort of, that kind of have it or you don't quality, and he has it, and guys have responded to him from the jump. I mean, even go back to the preseason, guys were, we're just, loving everything he brought to the table. So yeah, I think leadership-wise for Jones is not a question at all. It's all going to be, the play between the lines. That I think, like I said, he really kills it on the intangibles chart.
That's great to hear. Hopefully, he just keeps progressing. So I wanted to touch base with you, Dan, in reference to the defense a little bit. We know where they stand with a lot of questions in terms of the pass rush. It seems like what the Giants are going to do, if you read the reports, are maybe a little bit of the Patriots way, where they're going to scheme a pass rush. It can come from anywhere, and they're going to look to maybe pack up their secondary with some talent and be strong that way. We know where they stand with Marcus Golden. We know that they're out on Clowney as of right now. From my perspective, if this is a rebuild truly right now, then you want to see X-Man and you want to see Carter take this next step, let the kids on the roster play. But I wanted to get your thoughts on possibly, that scheme for a pass rush, what that may look like from a Giants perspective on the defense with the new defensive coordinator, and what to look for some of the young kids that they already have on the roster that are going to get a chance to play a lot.
Well, I think the teams that talk about scheming a pass rush are typically the teams that don't have great pass rushers.
Good point.
Obviously, the Patriots have had some success without, other than really Chandler Jones. They've had a lot of kind of, 6-sack, 8-sack type guys, and that's great. You certainly can succeed. They've proven that. But I think it also gets a little carried away because it's not something that's easy to replicate. Because I don't care who was the defensive coordinator. You don't have Bill Belichick on your staff if you're Matt Patricia or Brian Flores or Joe Judge. So he has a pretty strong handle on defensive game planning and how to use personnel. So that's not something that anyone has been able to copy, at a different stop. But then also they have really good personnel. I think that's the thing that gets lost. Like, yes, they don't have that Chandler Jones that obviously was there once upon a time that racks up 15 sacks. But the idea of you can build a secondary, like, good luck building a secondary as good as Stephon Gilmore and Devin McCourty and Patrick Chung. And then the linebackers they've rolled through there in the years, and just versatile guys who can do a lot of different things. Can rush the passer, can cover, can play the run. It's not easy to just it's one thing to have the blueprint, it's another thing to actually execute it. And obviously, Belichick and the Patriots are just a rarefied air in their ability to put their roster together and put the schemes together. I mean, I think it's certainly how the Giants have to go, because they don't have that blue goose pass rusher, to steal Gettleman phrase that I'd never heard before. But I don't think they should be running away from getting one if the opportunity presents. Like, I think it was tough this year because a lot of the top pass rushers got tagged. But listen, if they had the second pick, they were going to take Chase Young. So, they're not resistant to pass rushers because they have this brilliant scheme. You don't need one. They would have taken Chase Young hands down. So let's not get too carried away with the idea. They'd love the idea of just scheming a pass rusher. If they had a great pass rusher, they would certainly welcome him with open arms. I think that they're kind of stuck. They don't have any great pass rushers. There weren't great options in free agency, in the draft. So sure, you have to sell that we're going to do with scheme, and maybe they will do a case. But I think they're much better odds of having a good pass rusher be guys like Zimenez or Carter making a big leap. Jury's definitely out on those guys, but that is sort of the benefit of where they're at. They kind of get to sink or swim with these guys, and they'll kind of know going into next offseason, like, hey, we have something here, or like, man, we really need to address it because these young guys, they just aren't at the level that we need to have a, you don't have to have like 20 sack guys. You need to have quality pass rush, and just look at what they have right now. It's hard to get too excited about it.
Yeah, I would agree there. I thought that was something that they maybe could have addressed with some other moves, but they chose to go the young man's route. And that leads me to what really, when I saw this article that you wrote, man, I loved it. So OBJ, right? Giants fans think of Odell Beckham Jr., and I got another one for them. So we do a lot of mock drafts leading up to the draft, and I know that the Giants had 4 7th-round picks this year, and in every one of the mock drafts I did pretty much, I took OLUWOLE Betiku Jr., 6'3", 250 from Illinois. I thought the kid just didn't play a lot of football. He was raw. It looks like he has a ton of upside, a good motor, athletic ability. And then the Giants pick him up as an undrafted free agent. And, it's fun when you mock a guy and you're high on him, and then they pick him up and you get to see this guy play. Now, again, he's behind the 8 ball with the OTAs and the way things are happening right now. But in your time to talk to him or research him, break the fans, for the fans that don't have the athletic, give us a little breakdown on Betiku Jr., what you found out about him and why he may have a chance to stick.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to give the Cliff's Notes version because he's got quite a story. Even I wrote by 1,000 words, I could have run, could have done 5 times as long. It's just really a deep story. But the nuts and bolts of it are he was born in Nigeria and wanted to get out, and you kind of thought athletics was his ticket. So apparently they have camps over there where American high schools or I don't that stuff's a little shady to me. I don't know exactly the ins and outs of that. That's part of the story that I didn't get too deep into because there was so much else to touch on. But anyways, he wound up at a private school in America to play football. He had never played football, and then his junior year was the first time he ever put shoulder pads on. And it's funny, he even said he didn't want to wear the shoulder pads. He's a pretty built guy, and he wasn't even back then. He said, my shoulders are big enough. I don't think I need these. And they're like, no, you have to wear shoulder pads. So that tells you just how little football exposure he had. But he went out and had 11 sacks his junior year. Then the next year he came back and had 17 and a half sacks. And he was playing big time high school football out in California. So it wasn't like he was beating up on some random schools in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was a lot of guys at his school have gone on to big time colleges and even the NFL. I think Adoree Jackson might have been there. But the bottom line, he became a 5-star recruit. And again, this is a kid who in a matter of 2 years had never played football and then became a 5-star recruit, but went to USC. And just, the learning curve was way too steep. I mean, he didn't understand formations. He didn't understand anything really about the game other than he just had unbelievable athleticism in high school and was able to dominate. So he got there and got buried on the depth chart for a couple of years and just, couldn't get on the field. And again, he's at USC. It's not like he's backing up some scrubs. He's backing up a bunch of NFL type athletes there who have played football their whole lives and have much more experience and football IQ than he had. But he just kind of kept grinding away and ended up in Illinois for this past season. And I think it was 10 sacks or 11 sacks. I mean, so he kind of had his breakout year. And he had another year of eligibility left, but he'd already graduated. He just kind of felt like he was ready to get on with it. Obviously didn't get drafted, but he has no regrets because the way he looks at it is, 7 years ago, he was in Nigeria in the slums and, the barest of existences. So if he has to fight his claw to make it as undrafted free agent, that's not the worst thing in the world. I look at him as a guy who's totally a project because he really only had 1 year of college football playing at a high level. So he's an ideal candidate, I would think, to stash on the practice squad and just let him become, Brett Bielema's kind of pet project on the side this year. And then you'd hope maybe in 2021 or even 2022, however long they want to make this developmental project last, maybe then he makes an impact. I think it's going to be a pretty steep uphill climb for him.
Yeah.
But the raw talent and tools are definitely there. So definitely a guy to take a flyer on, bring him in. And like I said, you stash him on the practice squad and just work on him, nonstop. And if you ever get the football part to match up with the physical ability, you might have something really special.
Yeah, and with his work ethic too. I mean, the guy is a nonstop motor. I just thought if you had the right coaches around him, sometimes you get a diamond in the rough. And he's a guy that we're cheering for. And you did a great job on that article. I really enjoyed reading it. And tip of the cap, my friend. I wanted to touch base on one more thing with you before we wrap it up and let you go. I know that when the Giants chose Saquon Barkley a couple of years ago, I was one of the voices saying that this is 3 years before he's going to get a new deal. And that makes sense from Barkley's perspective. If I'm his agent, there's no way I let him walk out on that field next year for training camp without ripping up the 5th-year team option. Thoughts on that? Running back, rebuilding roster, obviously it's good business for Barkley, but some of the thoughts on is it real? I know a lot of Giant fans said he's a good guy. He's going to do what's best for the team. For me, I think that's foolish. I think that he has to look at it as a business. I know there were recently some comments about that. Just some thoughts on Barkley. And, do you think that new deal is going to come next year? Does it make sense for the Giants? And is that something we should look to?
I think it 100% is going to happen next offseason. I mean, you saw Carolina, what they did, because the way you described Saquon is exactly the way they would describe Christian McCaffrey in Carolina. And they didn't mess around. They didn't get into holdouts. They just took care of him, gave him a huge contract. Now, we've certainly seen the downside of giving running backs big contracts, whether it be Todd Gurley or David Johnson, Devontae Freeman, kind of the list goes on and on. A lot of these guys who, got off to really good starts in their careers, got a big deal, did not live up to them. But listen, you took Saquon with the number 2 pick in the draft. Obviously one rookie of the year. Last year, despite the injury, still had a pretty good year. And then you're assuming he's healthy this year, he's going to have another great year. So he's done everything you would have asked by that point. It'd be very hard to play hardball with him at that point because, again, you've made him basically the face of your franchise. He's lived up to that. He says and does all the right things. So they love him in the building. He's a captain as a second-year running back, which I got to think is pretty rare. So it would be I just don't see, maybe if Gettleman's gone and they bring in someone totally from the outside and Judge doesn't believe in paying running backs, maybe in that circumstance, but you still have John Mara and Steve Tisch, signing the checks. And again, it's not just about what a guy does on the field. You see a lot of 26 jerseys in MetLife Stadium, and he's important in that role in regard too. So no, I think he can say whatever he wants, but he definitely took notice of Christian McCaffrey. He's a pretty active guy on social media. If you look at what he retweets and likes, he definitely knows he's due next off season. I mean, rep by Rock Nation. They're not gonna say, "Oh yeah, we'll just figure it out down the road." They certainly have their ducks in a row, and they will be ready to cash in as soon as possible. So. Is it going to be a good idea for the Giants? I mean, again, we'll see. The Rams thought it was a good idea when they gave Todd Gurley that money, and it certainly didn't pay off. But, I think that the Giants have no choice. I mean, again, you've invested so much in him already. If he plays at a high level, I just don't see how you can justify not rewarding him. And if you're Saquon, there's no way I'm risking myself. When I have the chance to cash in, I'm not going to go, play a training camp, play a season, and then talk about after year 4. Like, there's just no chance. So, I doubt it'll get ugly because I think both sides will be motivated to get it done. And I'm sure it'll be, it'll set the bar a little higher than whatever McCaffrey got, and everyone will be happy. And then we'll see in 3-4 years if everyone is still happy. But I don't think this is going to become a big messy situation. I just think both sides will be too motivated to get something done next offseason.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Dan. I think that the writing was on the wall when they took him at 2. You were pretty much tied into that. I think that's what Gettleman was referring to with the $20 million in a savings. So we'll see how that plays out. One more question before we let you go. I was a little surprised with the schedule release. I thought the NFL was maybe a little arrogant in terms of not preparing I thought maybe you'd see the AFC versus NFC matchups at the beginning of the schedule, just in case we have to shorten the year. Just your thoughts on the schedule release in terms of, are we going to have football? Do you think it's a shortened season? What are your thoughts surrounding on if we're going to have football or not?
It's tough to say because, I think there was a report like the day before the schedule came out that it was going to be like a blatantly obvious, 4 games you could just lop off or move around. And then when the schedule came out, it wasn't as obvious because you had division games in week 1 and stuff. So people are saying, maybe they didn't account for, what potentially could happen. But then when you dove a little deeper, I think maybe Adam Schefter or someone reported that stuff is baked into the schedule where they do have some contingencies built in where they can either lop off certain games or shift the first 4 games to the back end of the season. And teams who play in week 2 have the same buys. Like, there's a lot of configurations to it that people way smarter than me figured out. And I'm more of a cross that bridge when we come to it type guy with that stuff because, again, I don't get paid to figure out all those different permutations. But apparently it's factored in. And I mean, listen, I certainly would be out of my depth to say if and when the season will start, when camp will start, when all that stuff will start. I mean, that stuff is so far beyond anyone's really ability right now. But I think they have to kind of have a plan. Like, this is what we're going to do, and business as usual, because they've kind of had that approach all off season, whether it be free agency, the draft. So they're going to just release the schedule. But again, I do think that maybe they didn't come out and say it, but they certainly factored in. We might not be able to just run business as usual. So, I mean, I think we'll just wait until we get a little closer. I would think by June, we're going to have a better idea because, guys will be reporting for camps. The people have to quarantine for 2 weeks whenever they get to camp. All that type of stuff has to be planned out in advance. You can't just wing it. So, I think in the next month or so, we'll have a much better idea. But, as of now, the show must go on. They benefit, obviously, because this happened in their offseason. They get to watch the NBA figure it out. They get to watch Major League Baseball and soccer and all these other things figure it out. And then they can use that as a blueprint for them to follow when it's their turn.
That's a great point. Well, Dan, again, I really appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to give our fans some insight. Again, at D Duggan, Duggan 21 on the Twitter. Make sure you give Dan a follow and subscribe to The Athletic. Dan, wishing you and your family nothing but health and happiness during these times. Really appreciate your time. Take care of yourself, my friend.
Yeah, my pleasure. Same to you.
Take care, man. Thank you. Bye-bye.